As you know, our pastor has been teaching very excellently on the importance of engaging the culture. So this is really appropriate, and it seems that the Lord has set it up for this time. I'm going to be welcoming the guests, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming. My name is Keith Hardeen. I'm going to be the host, and a little bit about me. I'm a constitutional rights activist and educator. I teach self-defense to youth at risk, and I also was formerly a use of force instructor for Los Angeles and Orange County probation officers. And myself and three others will be discussing school choice, the importance of legislation that will create education savings accounts. That's basically what it's all about, education savings accounts. And this is the right that parents have, your right to choose, your right as parents, grandparents. Also, if you're thinking, well, my kids are graduated, my grandkids are graduated, but you still vote. You're the voters. You are the people who decide in California. And this is very important. The thing I want to do as I start my statement, I'm going to do that first, and then I'll introduce each panelist, okay? Let me begin with a quote out of the book of Judges, chapter 2, verse 21 and 22. Now the anger of the Lord burned against Israel when he said, because this nation has transgressed the covenant I laid down for their fathers and has not heeded my voice, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations Joshua left when he died. In this way, I will test whether Israel will keep the way of the Lord by walking in it as did their fathers. I think that's very appropriate here. Our nation was founded on biblical principles, even though we have not always been faithful in following those principles, and even the men who settled that, some of them. But not to go into detail about that, the importance is that since they were founded on those principles, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Declaration is a moral standard for the Constitution. Those two have to be used interchangeably in order to understand what the liberties that the founders have instilled into generations ago, okay? It's also what helped to deliver us from slavery, brought us out of slavery, just as the Israelites were brought out of slavery. So here we have a similar situation today, talking about education. It's the minds that are enslaved. How do we bring those minds out of slavery? How do we exit us from that? We have a solution, school choice. The California Constitution, the Civil Rights Amendment, Article 1, Section 3, complements the First, the Ninth, and the 10th Amendments. And this says, the people have the right to instruct their representatives, petition government, and redress of grievances, and peaceably assemble without penalty. Therefore, only the people are sovereign and immune when met in convention, referendum, or election, and not public officials, agents, or assets. It recognizes the sovereignty of the people. What does it mean to be sovereign? Self-governing. Who gave us that right? God gave us that right. Okay, so that is what we are talking about here, is appropriating that right to govern ourselves, to send our kids, or to allow others to send their kids where they will. It's important to note that most of the amendments of the United States Constitution directly reflect the first principle outlined in the Declaration. I mentioned that. Now, James Wilson, a signer of both the Declaration and the Constitution, described the higher moral law as the laws of nature and of nature's God. There's the key right there, to know that we are a Christian nation. Because the laws of nature are simply God's law. Didn't God create nature? Yes, we know that. He also created reason, conscience, our spirit. So we know that God is the creator, and the Declaration acknowledges God as the creator. So this is very important to understand as a basis. The preamble of the Declaration, we talked about it, it says, when it becomes necessary to separate, it is the right of the people to separate. I don't want to go into the long detail for time's sake, but you got the gist of the idea of what I'm saying. Now, Education Code 51937 of Article 4, Section 13. This is Education Code of California. Listen to this. It is the intent of the legislature to respect the rights of parents or guardians to supervise their children, their education, with the ultimate responsibility for imparting values to their children. Now the question is, are those values being taught? The values that we hold true. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. But does everyone hold that? No. So what we're talking about is coming back to the principles of our values. The Declaration espouses those principles. Now, the scriptural references, this is Genesis 18:19. I have singled him out, Abraham, the Lord speaking. I singled him out so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord. Think about that. Keep the ways of the Lord. And so we're keeping the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. Then I will do for Abraham all that I have promised. And we understand the promises of Abraham. Understand that we're talking about keeping the ways of the Lord, training up a child in the way he must go. And when he's old, he will not depart. But how do you do that when you have the form of curriculum that is being introduced and has been introduced and is considered lawful in California? We'll go into some of those in a little bit more detail later, maybe. Okay, and when you get to your questions, you can ask questions, and maybe that'll also bring out more information on that. Okay, the next speaker will be Miss Ashley Gilliam, and she received her bachelor's degree from the University of Redlands in business. She is also a U.S. Air Force Reserve veteran. Wow, thank God for that. Thank you for your service. Ms. Gilliam is a real estate appraiser with over 3 decades of experience. Her personal life is punctuated by her commitment to family, church, and community. She has been a voice and advocate for youth. She's been striving to provide history and purpose and hope and engagement, and she will provide history to you today. We also have Danielle. You go after her. And that's Danielle Kelly. She has 35 years experience in business and human behavior. Ms. Kelly is a graduate of University of Southern California, a master's program, and is a speech communications with specialization in marketing, public relations from California State University, Northridge. Our final guest will be Dr. Vicki Alger. She's a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum and a research fellow at the Independent Institute of Oakland, California, and author of the book, Failure, The Federal Miseducation of America's Children. Alger's research focuses in education reforms that promote a competitive education marketplace and increased parental control over their children's education. And this is, again, what we are talking about, parental rights. Okay, everybody, so come on up. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hardeen. Okay, last year was a 400th year of Africans being brought here to the United States of America, okay? There were about 20 slaves that came over on the first ship. Through centuries of abuse, black people performed anyway. One thing we knew more than anything is that education was the key to success. Regardless of what torture that was insisted upon them, they learned how to read anyway because they knew that their kids had to be educated. Sometimes we forget about our history and what we're about and what we've done in this culture. We were the workers and the inventors in this society. Mostly everything you enjoy because the black man or woman invented it or they were part of that. And sometimes we forget that the history and think you see what you have now. Up to 50 years ago, like I said, we were the workers and inventors. We're just going to go over briefly some of the things that we have done in this society, and I can give you 10 more pages, lest you forget. We invented automatic gear shift, bicycle frame, blood plasma bag, cellular phone, chamber commodes that people could use a restroom actually inside. If those in the South know, we used to do outhouses, clothes dryer, curtain rod, dustpans, egg beater, electric lamp bulb, elevators, gas masks, you can read those, railroad signal. Wouldn't been for the black women, there would been no NASA program. That GPS you enjoyed getting here, you wouldn't have that either. Iron board, lawnmowers, locks, spark plugs. There's about 10 other pages that you can go to and see what we have done. How do we do that in this society with a limited education? One thing, we were very well educated because our moms and dads and families we were a part of, and they knew that we had to be educated in order to make a difference in this society, and educated we were. What we want to talk about just briefly is what's happened to us now, 50 years from, or 60 years from the 1950s. Well, when I grew up in the 1950s and 60s, 90% of the households were mom and dads, biblically. Then we had grandmas, we have aunties, we have uncles, and everyone that took care of us, but we had a real community and real society we worked with. If you flash through to 50 years later, 75% of children are born out of wedlock, compared to what 90% used to be. 75% of black boys in California don't meet the state reading and writing standards. 50% of black boys in California don't meet state English standards. 80% of black boys fail to meet state reading standards by the 4th grade. A large percent of these kids will end up on welfare, homeless, or in jail or in the graveyard. 60% of juvenile delinquents and 80% of adult inmates are illiterate. 48% of black boys in California don't even finish high school. California's black children are twice as likely as white students to be identified for learning disabilities and more likely to be identified for special education in general. Your child is unlikely to learn to read proficiently. California ranks 46 out of 50 states in the nation in the 4th grade reading proficiency, with roughly 3 or 4 students, 76%, failing to read at grade level, despite California's teachers being paid among the highest in the nation. There's a lot of opportunities out there, but if we have kids that are not graduating high school, are reading at a 4th grade level, okay, and are a lot of them on drugs, those are the same kids that are homeless, those kids can't get these good jobs that are available. One thing the schools are doing now, I don't know if you guys know this, if you haven't been in the public schools for a while, they have sexualized a lot of the classes. And it's just anti-Christ stuff that's going on, and we need parents to start speaking up and going into the schools, going to the curriculum, and see what's happening. Now, when we were growing up, we had health education classes. We took a week, the girls went to one class, the boys went to another class, we learned about biology, we came back together. These classes now have turned into how-to sex classes. So if you get offended by this, you're going to be offended more when you start reading the curriculum. So instead of condoms, we need to be talking about chemistry. Instead of anal sex, we need to talk about arithmetic. Instead of right to abortion, we need to be reading and writing. And instead of sex ed, we need to speak about some English. Now, what's happened, a lot of these kids are involved in these curriculums, and what happened, they're not being proficient in other areas because all these other things are put on them. Now, if you were a parent or a neighbor and you taught your child or another child some of the stuff the school is teaching your children, they'd be arrested for child abuse and promoting pornography. The last slide here I have, education, place, and purpose. At one time in our communities, God was a foundation, work with the family, the school, all work together in order to create that perfect union, okay? What happened is that with our families being decimated, we don't have that 90% rate anymore. We at the point now, the churches and the schools need to step back in, and once you get these kids into your household, what you need to do then, you need to help build families out in the communities. We have to get back involved and take our rightful place. We're losing so many of our kids, and I concentrate a lot on black boys because they're on extinction level. If we keep this up in the next 20 years, a lot of them, we won't be here. We've lost whole generation of children. And this is just some of the sayings from, some of the black leaders from before. One from Frederick Douglass. It is easier to build strong children than to rebuild broken men. From Malcolm X. Education is a passport to the future. Tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. And from Martin Luther King. The function of education is to teach one to think intensely and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that's a goal of true education. Thank you.
My name is Danielle Kelly, And let me tell you a little bit about my background, because yes, I did graduate from USC School of Social Work. Okay, I'm gonna have to do this. But I actually was brought into the school system on a specialized project. This was in 1992, where USC works with the state of California in Sacramento, and they recognized that they wanted to bring in mental health professionals. I am trained as a psychotherapist. I took specialized training as well as human behavior, but also working with children. The federal government was looking at a new initiative at that time. We now have a law called school-based mental health. I was the person that was designed to look at the research, create the research, bring the data out, give it to Sacramento, and give it to Washington. Because of their research that I had for South Central LA and Compton Unified School District, I was part of a team across the nation, and we now have school-based mental health. I was also part of the team where we had No Child Left Behind. And why is this important? Because I was brought in to actually be in the school system, operate as a psychotherapist, train the staff. What do we actually do? Why do we need to be in the schools? Bring in the information. I sat on the SARBs, attendance review boards. I sat on the IEPs. I looked at special ed. If there was a test that our kids were not doing well in, I went back to the kids and found out, why did you not do well in math and English? And I asked the questions. The things that I found out was unique, like the environment. A lot of times our legislation is from like UCLA. These are professors who've never stepped in Compton Unified School District, never stepped in Washington High School, and they make the laws and they go to Sacramento. What my purpose here today is because I do what is called psychosocial educational policy analysis. It's a long word, but it basically means I've been at the front line, and I'm at the front line. I then read what is going on in Sacramento in the federal government, and I analyze it for certain people and say, how does it impact your child on a day-to-day basis? Do you know who is controlling your school district? And I'll break this down, then I'll stop. It is the federal government. They come up with laws, for instance, saying that if you have kids that are fighting and throw up gang signs, you cannot expel them from class. They have to stay in your classroom. They make laws like that, never coming to talk to you. We have local boards, school board. We have the state superintendent. We have principals. We have the state legislature. We have the school board of education, and we have the county board of education. All these different groups of people make laws to impact on you and your child. A lot of times they're never in the schools. Most of the times they're never in the schools. So they make the laws, we find out it's right or wrong, and then we have to go and correct it. This is real important, and I'm going to end it up on my statement. If you're interested in what's going on in your schools and making a difference, you need to know who your state representative is, and you need to know how they vote. I know how they vote on every type of law that I'm interested in education. Before you vote them back into office, you also need to read, it's called EdSource. It lets you know all the legislation that is going on, and people like myself write in. That is how you know ahead of time what's coming down the pipeline. And before I get off, I want to say one other thing. The governor right now has $915 million he put in the budget for 2020 for teacher training and also hiring new teachers because we have a teacher shortage in California again. Do you know $915 million does not go to teacher training? It goes to programs for 4 years for teacher training. The same programs that the teachers already had. It is the exact same thing that we've been doing for the last 20 years. Nothing changed, except for $915 million is your taxpayer money for cute programs. And when it trickles down to the teachers, as I was looking at it, 5,000 teachers in science get $5,000. And they give the school districts, county administrators, $3 million to implement the program each, to give teachers $5,000 for 4 years. EdSource breaks down this type of legislation. And this is what I look at when I write my analysis for certain organizations. I say, this is really what it all means in 10 sentences and less. Thank you.
Well, hello, and I'd like to start off by saying, well, Danielle, I am shocked that neither DC nor Sacramento is an expert about other people's children or responsible stewardship of other people's hard-earned tax dollars. Well, a year ago, I don't think any of us knew each other. I'm not a Californian. I'm an Arizonan. I'm a proud Navy wife and stepmom of 4 teenage boys, all of whom went to district public schools, and the oldest one is now a Marine, so I've got three big guys at home. But the reason I'm here is that just next door, your neighbors in Arizona have actually done what I think California was destined to do. Now, today we're talking about school choice. I want to be very clear because I think school choice can start meaning different things to different people. I'm not talking about, oh, my child reads books in this building or this block or that block. For me, school choice is ultimately a parent's rights issue. Either you believe that parents have the God-given, unalienable right to direct the education and upbringing of their children, or you don't. It's just that simple of an issue. Nothing else, no other differences matter. Why people look to Arizona is because, raise your hand if you live in a state that still tells you you can only pick your district public schools based on your zip code. Notice my hand's not up. Raise your hand if you live in a state that tells you how many great public charter schools can open or how many children can enroll in them. We got rid of that foolishness 25 years ago. We also have 4 scholarship tax credit programs. So donors can give to nonprofit organizations, and those organizations give scholarships. So if you are sending your children to a private school and you're paying out-of-pocket tuition, that's a real sacrifice no matter where you live, isn't it? It is, especially if you're paying taxes. So you're paying for the public schools that just for whatever reason aren't working, but your child needs a private education, you prefer that. No, 4 programs. ESAs are the latest advance, and I'm proud that we have had ESAs now for 10 years. What are ESAs? Has anybody ever had a health savings account or been in the military and had a dedicated use travel debit card? It's the same thing. Let's say you're a parent, and for whatever reason you don't prefer a public education for your child. You go to the state and you sign a contract that says, I promise not to enroll my child as long as I'm in the ESA program. Then guess what happens? The state deposits, this is how it works in most states. The state deposits at least 90% of what it would have sent to your child's school district into your child's account. Moms, dads, grandparents get the dedicated use debit card. And in Arizona, the average is about $6,000 or so, and it's a little bit, it's more for special needs children because they're more expensive to educate. What can parents buy? Private school tuition, tutoring, test preparation, special education therapy, anything you can imagine. And here's the beautiful part in most programs. With the money that's left over, and I know in education we're not used to hearing, there's money left over? With the money that's left over, that stays in the child's account and it rolls over to future expenses, including college tuition. Imagine that. So let's go over the California numbers. I promise, very few things shock me anymore being in education policy research. This one did. I want you to think of a figure, $18,000. What could you buy with $18,000? That might be, tuition at a, pretty good college. It could be a reasonable car. No, you know what that is? 1 year of public education in the state of California. Now listen, if Mr. Alger were here, he would attest to this. I have no problem spending money. None whatsoever. But I want value for what I'm getting. So if we were, by the way, Arizona spends about 40% less than that. It's not quite half of that, but it sure is an $18,000. So what are we getting for that? And I want you to think of what happens when you have a system where children are simply, they become a captive audience. If you can't afford to move, and let's face it, moving's expensive, you're not going to do your best. It's human nature 101. But here's also the problem in California, too. There's not a whole, people don't have to work really hard to earn your trust and work to enroll your child. So even at the big fancy schools in Beverly Hills where median home prices are about $1 million and change, majorities of children are failing in at least one or more grades in those schools too. Because everybody's got a captive audience. Let's look at what's going on in Arizona versus California. And again, our spending is about $10,000 on average on a good day. Now, can you see that clearly? Okay, let me explain what it is. I'm not a very good graphic artist. Essentially what we have on the left-hand column are the Nation's Report Card, or NAEP scores, from 2003 for Black 8th grade children in math. So the top red bar is Arizona. The bottom red bar, just about an inch from the bottom, is California. So what happened between 2003 on the left and 2019 on the right? What parental choice programs did California implement? Well, you got Parent Trigger. But again, parents can petition to have their school turned into a charter school, but only if the school district agrees. So it's very hard. It hasn't, again, parents, the balance of power is out of whack. Arizona we passed 3 private school scholarship programs and our education scholarship account program, and we expanded that program every year. What happened? Oh, look, California went down. The absolute scores went up, but the relative ranking went down. Arizona is tied for number 2, tied with Massachusetts, which is a rock star in terms of student achievement, and we're just behind Virginia by 1 point. Well, what do those gaps mean? Back in 2003, if you were a Black 8th grader in math class in Arizona, you would be the equivalent of a full grade level ahead of your California peers. By the way, for almost half the price. What about today? A Black 8th grader in math class in Arizona is now the equivalent of a grade and a half ahead of their California peers for almost half the spending. What's the difference? You have 2 choices. You can either keep Sacramento, DC, your school board, everybody else but parents in charge, or you can put the real education experts in charge. And that's what School Choice 2022 does. It puts the rightful balance of power back to where it should be. Parents make the shots. You decide how to spend the money for your child. We're all spending it. And why does this girl from Arizona, this woman from Arizona, come and tell us anything about California? My federal tax dollars are going to California too. The bottom line is this. Anywhere parents, God-given, unalienable rights to direct the education and their upbringing of their children, it's not just academics. A lot of parents are very concerned and are pulling their children out of district and charter public schools in California because they can't square it with their faith. People of faith are having a really hard time, and that's even if you find out what's being taught. You don't have to be told what's being taught. Just hand over the money, hand over the tax dollars, and hand over your children. There's also another issue of safety. These are the top 3 concerns parents have. Academics, you want your children, your family beliefs supported. And number 3 is safety. Parental choice in education accomplishes every one of those goals. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard a lot of scary things about, what happens when we put parents in charge of their children's education? Let me tell you, the upshot is all the doomsday scenarios have not happened. You want to know what happens when we put parents in charge of their children and their children's education dollars? You can go down in achievement or you can go up.
Before we open for questions, we're just going to go over one thing here. I'm sure most of you know the story of the Tower of Babel, how the people were trying to build this tower to go to God. And at that time, they were just in one lockstep and one language. And even God came down and said, you know, look at these people here. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. That's God saying that. And I paraphrase the same way. If the people of faith will start working together with one purpose and one voice, there's nothing that we can't do with God on our side. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, everybody, it's time for questions.
Well, even though our school board rules and regulations say that parents can opt out of programs, apparently we're not allowed to opt out of the sex education that they're teaching right now. How do we take that back as parents?
Okay, I'll answer that because it's a policy issue. What happened was Governor Jerry Brown signed legislation that said it is not really under sex education. He had it under civil rights, where he said that everyone, starting kindergarten on up, is supposed to learn about LGBTQ. They're also supposed to learn that there's 15 different genders, and he did not put it in science class. He put it under civil rights. What can you do? There's an organization called the Mental Health Advocacy. They are attorneys. It is no cost to you. And also, they will help you with your IEP. But also, I was talking to one of the attorneys, and they really should get involved with this issue. It's a constitutional right. California has its own constitution, and you have a right to self-determination. Jerry Brown knew when he signed, and he said it. He knew when he signed the legislation that it's probably not going to hold up to legal challenge. And that's why I say go back to the people that you vote for, because your Attorney General, Kamala Harris, was supposed to stop that. She let it go through, knowing that if she didn't stop it, no one could challenge it. So your Attorney General, you should write them, you should get an attorney, and I'm going to end on this. The federal government has a law that if you sue the education, that the Department of Education has to pay for your attorney.
Parents have forgotten that you're in control, and they've forgotten that the people that we sent to these legislative work for us. We don't work for them. So when my son graduated like a few years ago from high school, I went to the parent-teacher conference. 40 kids in class, 2 parents show up. Next class, 40 kids, 3 parents show up. Next class, maybe no more than 4. I'm looking around and saying, where are the parents? And what happened, we have got to the point where we're busy, we're doing other things, we're not putting the energy into and taking our control back. People always tell me, well, they got the strong ACLU and they got a strong union, things like that, and there may be a couple of thousand of them. I got 10 million parents. And when parents stand up and say, listen, we're going to take our control back, and the way you start that on local level, what you need to do is get together with parents that you know in your group. Start going to the school once a month. If you have a school of 3,000, once a month, 500-600 parents at least need to show up at that school. We want to volunteer in the classroom, we're in the lunchroom, we're everywhere. The problem why they can do a lot of this is because they never see us, but 1 or 2. So it's time for us to get active again and stay control like we once were.
Okay, Tiffany.
Hi, my question is regarding how do you deal with, I want to know who's eligible. Like here we have a large illegal immigration population, just like Arizona does. So how do you deal with that? Like who's eligible to receive this?
Well, that's an excellent question. That's something that actually has come up. We do have laws now that you do have to be a citizen in college. At the local level, the nonprofits, our existing programs, come up with their policies, and essentially, if you are eligible to attend a public school in the state, you are also eligible for an ESA. So that's going to vary by state policy. My understanding is that California makes exceptions and various cities have different, it's very contentious. The standard policy is if you are eligible to attend a public school in a given state, you are eligible for the program.
Say that parents need to take more responsibility for their children's education. Look at what they are bringing home, homework, look at their class, ask them, engage your kids. Ask them, what'd you guys learn today? I talk to my nieces all the time. They're sitting back there. And I always say, what did you guys learn today? What did you bring home? Amber, she's quite a sharp young lady. But I said, what do you bring home today? Ashley, Amber, what did you guys learn? What did your teacher say? Those kind of things. And just look for signs of, that kind of teaching that disagrees with your values. And then begin to start instilling back into them the truth. So, next question.
Yeah, you already told me that I, as a grandparent, can have a voice, but what kind of things can I do to help with this thing? And also, I have a 20-year-old that has gotten caught up in the system unfairly, and he's a 20-year-old, but I want to know if there's something I can do to still help him.
There's a great thing with ESAs, I'll keep it short, because a growing number of grandparents are raising their grandchildren, whether it's through being in the juvenile justice system, addiction, and so forth. And so it's important that in California, the Education Savings Account program, most people are eligible under ours. California would be number one in the nation. We would make California's program would be for everybody. So money doesn't go to a district or to a bureaucracy. It would go to every child's account. And so the good thing about that is that you would be able to get your grandchild maybe the additional services and counseling he or she would need, as well as a program or a school, or put together all the tutoring you want that works best for you.
Okay. So I'm going to answer the question briefly on this way, because I do mental health court hearings, as well as doing the policy. There are a lot of programs. So what you want to talk to your son about is there's a lot of training programs and money that is going into the incarcerated population. Holly Mitchell, again, know what who you're voting for, know what they're standing for. She is very big on a lot of people's sentences being reduced. They're being released early, and there is millions of dollars that is being carved out of Los Angeles County for them to have training, housing, all different types of services. And so I would definitely look into that, of, if you know where he is him connecting with those services because of the new criminal reform that Holly Mitchell is spearheading. And if she gets to become board of supervisor, she's definitely going to spearhead that more at the local level. They are looking for people who are on good behavior, taking those programs and letting them out of the system early.
Is there an organization, nonpartisan or whatever, that you can belong to that just working for our children? And I want the policies of whatever that we work for to be effective. What can we do in our neighborhoods?
What it is with writing this bill that's coming through, we try to get it on the 2020 ballot. We just weren't able to. We'd rather do it right than do it quick. And I know a lot of things taking place. So now we're trying to get this bill, school choice bill, on the 2022 ballot, okay? So next year, we're going to really start forming groups, and that's why we need your contact information, and so we can start getting together. See, we need a petition signed. I think for this particular legislation, they need like 600,000 signatures, okay? We want to get at least 1.5 million to put it on the ballot. Okay. Once you get on the ballot, then they can vote. But in the interim, what you can do when you sign your list back there and we start a list going, we'll be asking for people to volunteer in their neighborhoods, have more group discussions like this to make people more informed what's going on, and then see what they can do on their local level to try to help their kids. But it really is going to come down to you to bring in your community of friends and stuff together. We'll be more than willing to come out, and talk. I do it all the time, and get these groups formed so we can help one another to get this on the ballot for 2022.
And stay vigilant. We're going to give you more information in time, and be patient, be persistent.
As I stated, I went into the schools. I was there at Washington High School. I was there at Compton Unified School District, Roosevelt Elementary School, working the programs as well as working with the legislatures. What can you do? Volunteer in the schools. I'm going to give you a story that still to this day happened. I remember when it happened in 1992. I've been around for a while. I will never forget this. I was brought in 1992 as a pilot program for USC before I actually went into the school districts. I had 10 kids that they said was the failures of Washington High School. I will never forget one of the students I had, first generation, who wanted to get off of welfare, and she wanted to go to medical school. For some reason, her teacher refused to give her the biology book. she was in 10th grade. She slammed the door in her face and said, "You don't need that, and get out of my face." I will never to this day forget that, because I was a student at USC and I just never heard of it. Plus I was also an adult and I still never heard of it. When she came to me crying, I went to that teacher, had a few words with her, very polite, and I got the book for her, and I said, "I hope I never ever hear of this again." So my statement to you is, I notice the schools that have people volunteering, they don't have that problem, because the students know you. You have to be on a consistent basis. They will go to you and says, "Mr. So-and-so in math is not teaching us math. He's playing games." You will handle it because you'll go talk to him and they will correct. If you can, volunteer on a regular basis in the schools and you'll hear what's going on.
If you say that this money can be used, that is designed for K to 12, also for college, would this money not disqualify that child from getting financial aid? And also, what is determined that the mothers, the dads, and whoever, the uncles and caregivers are not going to take that money and misuse it?
First, would having the college money disqualify you from federal aid? Under virtually every state in the country, including California, they have a state like college contribution plan, college savings plan that is tax deferred. In other words, parents can make contributions already. There was some state match, and it's not, you don't have to pay taxes on it. You're not penalized for it. So that's a long way of saying no. You can roll those. What happens when a child graduates from high school? The funds roll over into the state's pre-existing 529 college savings plan. So you're not penalized and you don't lose aid. The next question has, over accountability. This is what I love about education savings accounts. Think of whenever we travel and we have to submit receipts and get reimbursements. When parents are accepted and their children are accepted into an ESA program, you get a parent handbook that spells out what are acceptable and unacceptable K-12 expenses. So every quarter, you don't just get, for easy math, say it's $12,000. You don't just get $12,000 put into your child's bank account. It's done quarterly. So you get the first installment, and then to get the next installment, you have to submit receipts and prove that your spending is legitimate. I would really love to say that every Arizonan is an angel and no one has ever spent that money badly. But the difference between a parent under this program either just making a mistake and repaying it, or someone who really goes out and tries to buy a big screen TV, is that we find out about it within weeks. How many people have read a story in a newspaper within the past year about years later it was discovered that tens of millions of dollars have been stolen and we're never going to get it back for our children? What I love about the ESAs is that every quarter, not only is it independently verified, it's spot verified. And you have to pay the money back. So our fraud rate, our goal for a fraud rate with misspending is 0. We're at less than 0.5% because you have to pay it back.
And just remember, there's no perfect program because there are no perfect people. Should our liberty be stifled just because some people abuse it? I mean, it's kind of like the simple, I remember when Dr. Betty, our beloved Dr. Betty, said one time, she said that people would say to her, "Well, you're giving money during Christmas time away to people, and some people abuse that freedom." Well, she said, leave that to God. I just think that liberty, freedom, the blessings of liberty are what this country is all about. And that's why I talk about it from that perspective, the right to parents to choose.
My question is it true that in some of the schools, the bathrooms have been closed or made unavailable?
I'd like to say this. If you were back in school, the bathrooms would not be closed. They cannot close the bathrooms. It is up to the parents to address it, make sure it's cleaned up. That's when you volunteer. They can do a lot of things if you're not in school.
All right, I'm looking at this notice and this the flyer she said, it says 2020. Now, are these choice programs already in effect? Is it something you're trying to get on the ballot for 2022?
Right. Yes.
Do we have a choice right now, today, starting the next semester, to switch schools or change our children around. And I want to say one more thing. We as parents, especially black parents, we drop the ball.
Yep.
I worked at LA Unified. My children already all graduated from LA Unified, and I remember going to PTA meetings. I have a national honor thing where I went to the PTA all in Chicago, all around. But anyway, I want to say we dropped the ball because we stopped going to meetings, we stopped going to PTA meetings, we stopped going to school council meetings, and we need to be there.
That's right.
I have been at meetings where it was just me and two people, but there were other races and other nationalities. If they didn't come, they sent their nannies or they sent somebody. We need to get back into these schools.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
how these laws
Yes.
pass.
Thank you.
And one thing too, Arizona may sound like relatively, oh, isn't it wonderful, everything's perfect. We're still fighting for our lives. And what we do is we get a group of parents working together, moms, dads, grandparents. It's unofficially loosely called Mommy Lobby. That's what the governor dubbed it. But no one person can follow all of this stuff. It's constant. So some people watch bills that come out of the legislature. Some people watch what's going on at school boards. We find out what parts of the state everybody lives in, because you can't do it. So we've got two people at least covering school board meetings and watching them if you can't go, because that's where it happens. These folks who won't shoot straight with parents about what's they're handing out in health class, or other classes, you know, they're working at this 24/7 with our taxpayer dollars. We have to work together and divvy up and divide and conquer, because we can't quit our day jobs as moms and dads and grandparents. So we have to work together.
Let me close out with prayer. And Father, we thank you for the opportunity here. We thank you for Crenshaw Christian Center, the pastor, the board, the staff who allowed us this opportunity here. We thank you for the people who did show, and that hearts and minds are being prepared. And they are being prepared for a great thing that you are going to do in California, to bring California back to its founding principles. And we thank you, Heavenly Father, as we go in peace. In Jesus' name. If there